everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to replace the spark plugs in a 2009 BMW 328i with a 3-liter inline 6. So this job looks a little bit daunting looking at the engine because it kind of looks like the engine is sunken way back into the cowl, but I assure you taking the cowl off is no big deal. It's just a couple of 8mm bolts. I'll leave links down below in the description to parts and tools you might need along the way, and I call them out as I go. So doing this job yourself ensures that the job is done correctly, and it's going to save you a ton of money. The book says they can charge 1.4 work hours for this job. This would not take me 1.4 hours. This would take me, if I wasn't filming, maybe about 40 minutes. There's no way it's 1.4 work hours, but they get to charge you that. So what does that mean? Well, it depends on how much they charge hourly. For BMW, they're probably going to charge 200 bucks an hour, so that's like 280 bucks just in labor, and this was not 280 bucks worth of work if you ask me. Not to mention they're probably going to charge you 10 bucks a plug, if not more, maybe like 15 a plug, so you're saving tons of money there by buying these off of Amazon. And again, I will leave links down below in the description to everything I've used here today. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. Alrighty, so here is our BMW 328i with our inline 6. You might see that basically half of the engine is covered by this cowl piece. While I believe it to be technically possible to do this job without removing this, I'm going to tell you right away, it's going to be about 1,000 times easier to just remove this, and you'll be able to see what I'm doing a lot better. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So these bits on the side are really easy to remove. They just have a little clasp. You can just undo that. There's another one on the far side. We can just go ahead and remove that, exposing our master cylinder and reservoir. We can set this plastic piece aside. We can do the same thing over here. Really simple. So the next thing we can do is remove the 6 8mm bolts that hold this plastic piece in place. And that'll just come right out. The next thing we can do is remove our wire harness support. I believe that's what this is. And that can just pull straight towards you and down. And I want to do that right now. That way it's easier when this plastic piece is still bolted in place. So to get this guy out of here, it looks like we need to remove this 8mm bolt. And this one on the other side as well. Get that guy out of there. Before we just go pulling away, we need to look around and make sure we've removed this sensor, which just turns clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on how you're looking at it, and removes. So on the front side of this cowl piece, where we remove this wire harness holder, there's another one, and it looks like it just comes straight towards us, like that. Interesting. It looks like on one of these it has a safety, but the other ones it doesn't. Probably been broken off of there, so if there is a safety, just go ahead and get a small standard screwdriver and reach in there and depress on it, on all 3 of them, and then pull it off. And then we can remove this plastic cowl piece and expose the entire top of the engine. So in order to expose our coil packs, we need to remove this plastic engine cover piece, and don't worry so much about these wiring harnesses. They're just going to kind of flap around. It's okay. We're going to take a size 5 Allen. Make sure it's fully seated. We'll remove our bolts here. There's 3 of them. We can pull straight up and back. Excellent. So you have a pretty good look at number 1 here. And how you remove these coil packs is you just pull up right here, ideally in the middle, all the way up until the connector is disconnected. So the coil pack is unplugged. So at this point, before you remove the boot, it's a good idea to spray around here with some compressed air. Ours really isn't that dirty. I wouldn't really worry about it in this instance. Also, there's really no way for anything to fall in there. It's not like a flat surface or anything, but it is a good idea to go ahead and give everything a nice spray down. That way no dirt ends up in your engine. And then we can carefully remove it. I like to do a little twisting action as I'm pulling up on it to not rip the boot. That came out absolutely perfectly. So before we remove the spark plug, what I like to do is just grab a teensy bit of WD-40 and just spray it down in there. It doesn't need to be a lot, just a little dab will do you. And that's what that's going to do is, or any penetrating oil, what that's going to do is get down in there and make sure the threads don't gall as they come out. These are aluminum heads. I also want to mention that the engine is a little warm. It's not hot. I'm not working on a hot engine here, but it's a little warm. Aluminum heads kind of like to be a little warm when you remove the spark plugs. Just a little tip for you. So the next thing we're going to do is take our 5/8 spark plug socket, link down below in the description, and a long extension, and we're just going to feed that down in there very carefully. So we go ahead and feed that down in there. Now on this, you'll feel it. There we go. Makes that nice sound. You'll feel that the spark plug socket is properly seated, and you won't be able to turn it, obviously. And you want that fully down on the spark plug nut itself. You don't want it to be half on, half off, and then you round the nut. That would be disastrous. So we can get our ratchet and break it loose. Oh, it's coming out like butter. Perfect. Sometimes when this is like really tough and like really hard, what I like to do too is I'll move the ratchet about a quarter turn off, and then I'll reverse it and tighten it back on about 1/8 of a turn, and then do a quarter turn, 1/8 of a turn, quarter turn. So you're very slowly walking the threads off of the head, and that prevents them from galling. It is a really easy way to ensure that you won't have to take the cylinder head off. If it's really tough or it makes like a really weird creaky sound, I would do that as well, but this is coming out really easy. This is like a cupcake here. Once we're sure all the threads have been taken out of the head, we can gingerly remove our spark plug socket, and our spark plug should come with it and look just like that. So I also wanted to mention why I use anti-seize. I just wiped the spark plug off, and you can see there is a little bit of anti-seize on there, and that's probably why these spark plugs came out so nice. So it's just whoever did this last put anti-seize on it, and I thank them for it, and you're gonna thank yourself in the future. Alrighty, so over at my workbench here, we can see some assorted products. Here is our stock plug that we took out, or whatever plug somebody put in there. It's a Denso IKH20TT, very good plug. I will leave a link down below in the description to a comparable product to this one. However, I do like these AC Delco rapid fires. I know some people have a problem with putting AC Delco parts on their BMW, and that's fine. You're free to use NGK or Denso. Both are very good products. However, everything I do is going to be exactly the same, despite whatever spark plug you use. So, to double check, look at the thread length of the spark plug, the overall length of the spark plug, the diameter of the electrode on the end, everything. You want to make sure the plugs are identical, and I've already checked these are. The next thing I want you to do is put on a glove of some sort and put your fingers around the porcelain of the spark plug to make sure it's not cracked or broken. You'd be able to feel it. Be careful, it is glass. So you just want to check for cracks. I don't feel any. This feels absolutely perfect. I've had very good luck with these AC Delco plugs. I put them in all my cars. They work great for me. The next thing we're going to do is double check our gap. These usually come pre-gapped at 30 thousandths, but we can go ahead and check with our gap checker. That's a little too big. Ooh. Just push on that with my thumb a little bit. Oh, right on the money. It's like 31. I'm okay with that. So it's right at 30 thousandths or 31 thousandths. That's the gap for this car for stock. So this thing's ready to rock on that front. The next thing we're gonna do is look down in the boot and make sure there's no leftover dielectric grease that's maybe gone bad or could be replaced. I don't see anything in there. It actually looks pretty dry. If there is old grease, go ahead and do your best to get that out of there with like a Q-tip or something. And we can take some dielectric grease, link down below in the description, of course. And we can just squirt a bit in there. You don't really need much, just, you know, a little bit. And then we're gonna get some anti-seize, again, link in the description, and I just like to put on a bit like this, and then you don't have to do this, you can leave it like that as well. Make sure you don't get any on the electrode strap, as I like to just spread it around a little bit to give me an idea of how much anti-seize is actually on the threads, and that looks very, very good. So we're gonna run that. So what we're gonna do next is carefully load our spark plug into our spark plug socket. You don't wanna do this forcefully because you don't wanna crack that porcelain. And in the same vein, we're gonna be very ginger and very gentle when we're lowering it down into the spark plug well. So as we're feeling around in the head for our thread, sometimes what I like to do is turn it to the left and you'll kind of feel it drop into its home. And then, well, that's not quite right. Left, there we go. There we go, that feels good. So you'll feel when you're putting the spark plug in the head, if it tightens really quick and you're not standing here for a little while spinning this, that means you're probably cross-threaded, and that is not good. You need to take that out and reposition it so the threads are aligned properly. You should be able to do this by hand for quite some time until it gets, starts getting snug like that. That feels excellent. So the next thing we can grab is our torque wrench, our 3/8 torque wrench. Now I've gotten this off of Amazon, so I'll leave a link down below in the description for you. So I have my torque wrench set to 23 Newton meters. Here we go, 23 Newton meters. That is perfect. And then we can gingerly, this is really important, gingerly remove our socket. You don't want to bonk the porcelain on the way out, and then renders the spark plug basically worthless. Very carefully. Excellent. So the next thing we can replace is our ignition coil. Just slink that down in there. Make sure that is fully seated on top of the spark plug. There's really no fastener or anything to make sure, like on other cars. So this one, just make sure it is fully down like that. And then the next thing we can do is plug in our ignition coil. So as we're plugging this in, you'll notice this top piece coming down, so you can just do that at the same time until it locks in place like that. The good news is the rest of the spark plugs and ignition coils are exactly the same. Do them exactly as I've shown you on number 1, and I know I'm gonna get the comment, well, you showed the easy one. Yeah, I did, because you can see that one. It helps nobody if I show you how to do this. So, but if I run into a problem where you have to take something else off, I will turn the camera back on and I'll let you know. But from what I can see, there shouldn't be any problems and should be smooth sailing from here. So just go ahead and copy exactly what we did on cylinder 1 for the other 5. So you might notice on these rear mounted coils that if you try to remove them, you pull up on this, just like the other ones, but the connector runs into the harness or some other innocuous piece of plastic and it won't come out. So what you have to do is actually reach in there and wiggle the ignition coil up with it still connected, which I don't like doing, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes until it clears, and then you can remove it all the way. So that's a little trick for you on these rear, that was cylinder number 5 on these rear mounted ignition coils. So that's the only speed bump I've hit so far. So I've already replaced the plug on number 5 here. To get the ignition coil back in, we can go ahead and kind of put it in about halfway and then plug it fully in. Like that, and then push it down onto the plug. Just make sure that is fully seated, like that. Perfect. So that's how you get those little bit more tricky ones if there is, a piece of plastic or a piece of wiring harness in the way. And if you don't believe me that I did all 6, here are all 6 of the old plugs. I didn't find any other speed bumps besides the one I went over on the ignition coils. Actually, number 6 is probably one of the easier ones to get to. 4 is a little tricky and 5 is a teeny bit tricky, but if you do that trick I showed you, they're no big deal. So with all 6 of our spark plugs replaced, we can go ahead and replace our engine cover piece. This guy. So we'll just lift up the wiring harness and slide that back until it sits in its home. Very nice. So then we can replace these size 5 Allen bolts, and very light on the torque. I only have it set at a 4. I think the torque spec is something like 5 Newton meters. It's really light. And it's just holding on a cover piece, and it just goes into a little clip, so don't go crazy on this. Wrist tight would be perfect. Okay, now we can replace our plastic cowl piece, making sure we pick up this sensor over here on my left hand. And we can just gently set that into its home. making sure these two bolt holes line up, and they do. So they're all 8mm fasteners we're going to be dealing with, but the ones that hold down this big cowl piece have very fine threads. So don't try to use a coarse thread bolt in a fine thread hole. And again, wrist tight on that guy. It doesn't need to be Hulk tight or anything. It's only 8mm. And then we can grab our other fine threaded bolt and replace that guy as well. Very good. So down here, we need to hook the wiring harness back on to our cowl piece here. That just lines up onto the little tabs there. It might be a little tricky, might fight you a teensy bit, but we'll win in the end. There we go. That's pretty easy. Line those up, and then second burst, same as the first for this guy. Perfect. So now we can put on our cabin air filter shroud. Goes on just like that. Secures in place. Now these are the 8mm bolts we removed before, but look. They're the coarse thread. They're quite coarse. So that means they're going into plastic. So these threads don't have any metal threads to interface with. They're just interfacing with plastic. So it's a metal bolt going into plastic. And the reason I bring that up is this metal fasteners are going into plastic and there are no metal threads to receive it. So be really careful when you're replacing these. I think the torque spec is something like 3 Newton meters. It's really light. So then we can replace our brake reservoir cover. And that just kind of goes into its spot. There we go. Just kind of force it down until that latch clasps, and the back one does as well. We can do the passenger side, same exact procedure. Oh yeah, that's a good sound. And then don't forget to plug in this sensor as well. Well, not plug in, but replace. Just put it in its home, rotate it clockwise. So now we can hear the fruits of our labor, turning the engine on, and it should run perfectly. It kind of ran a little bit rough before I changed the plugs out, so hopefully that fixes it. Oh yeah, listen to that baby purr. Oh, it runs like a top. Perfect. Well, as you can hear, it runs absolutely perfectly. If it was kind of stumbling or wasn't quite running just right, I would go ahead and recheck all your connectors. You might have forgotten to plug something back in. Maybe a cylinder's not firing, or maybe a spark plug is defective from factory. You're gonna go ahead and have to identify which one and replace it. If you don't want to do that, you can just replace all of them again. It really wasn't that bad. But thankfully, ours is running absolutely perfectly. So our job is done. So that is how you replace the spark plugs in a 2009 BMW 328i. Not as bad as I thought that was going to be. I thought that was going to be a lot harder and involve a lot more work to get to the plugs and remove them. Honestly, not that bad. This was like maybe a 5 out of 10 on difficulty for spark plugs. A little challenging, but not bad. Definitely something someone can do in their garage with an hour to spare. Very, very easy compared to some other spark plug jobs I've done and how hard I thought it was going to be due to it being a BMW, and those are usually a little more difficult to work on. This job is totally approachable, and I implore you to do it yourself instead of spending the money at a mechanic or, heaven forbid, the dealer. Thank you so very much for watching. If this video has helped you at all, please leave it a like. It does help the channel out a lot, and if I've earned your subscription here today, I would really appreciate it. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Wolverine spark plug claws. Right.